Thank you for staying with us. The African Network for Environment and Economic Justice, ANEEJ, and other CSOs have welcomed the Church of England Pensions Board's announcement of its intention to divest from Shell and other oil and gas companies after concluding none were aligned with efforts to halt global warming. ANEEJ Executive Director David Ugolor made the group's position known, while also urging the Church of England to consider the communities in the Niger Delta who do not have the luxury of moving on from the devastation and environmental degradation left in the wake of oil exploration by oil companies, and urged the Church to find ways to support their quest for justice. The group also resolved to undertake high-level advocacy to engage investors and government currently supporting oil companies in Nigeria to disinvest from funding fossil fuel extraction in Nigeria. We're joining us via Zoom is the Executive Director, African Network for Environment and Economic Justice, Reverend David Ugolor. Good morning and congratulations on your re-election into the board of the United Nations Convention Against Corruption Coalition representing Sub-Saharan Africa. Congratulations.
Thank you very much.
Right. Now, let's begin with you walking us through the process and perhaps the hurdles you and your organization had to go through to get to this point where the Church of England is seeking to disinvest from from Shell, basically.
Again, thank you for this opportunity to again share update on the Church of England decision. They've just announced the investment away from Shell and other oil company. That decision has been taken by the Church of England. We're very happy and we congratulate the Church of England, and particularly the Archbishop of Canterbury for his leadership and for responding to the cry of millions of people around the world who have suffered under the oil and gas exploration, which has not brought any benefit, that will perhaps continue to reinforce the urgent need to address the climate change challenge that is falling out of oil exploration. We, on behalf of my organization, African Network for Environment and Economic Justice, we convened last year a People's AGM. It's an alternative civic space to articulate people's issues, human rights issues, and raise questions around the activities of oil and gas explorations in Nigeria. While you understand that during, in the period of May, June, July, oil companies from Shell, Chevron, ExxonMobil, they organize their AGM where they invite their shareholders, they discuss business opportunities, profits. And in the last few months now, you can see the groundbreaking profits companies like Shell, Chevrons are all making from the crisis arising from Ukraine. But while this huge profit is coming to the shareholders, people are suffering under the activities of this company. So we thought it wise that while these companies are organizing their AGM, the people have to also have a space to discuss whether the activities of these companies are actually helpful to the people. So we organized the People's AGM last year, the first of its kind in Nigeria. So we were able to invite different stakeholders, particularly indigenous people from the Ogoni land, from different parts of the Niger Delta, and other stakeholders from across the country. After extensive discussions reviewing the activities of this company, including Shell, we resolved with an outcome. And that outcome was followed up with a peaceful protest to the Shell office in Lagos, where we also had a world press conference, where the letter we earlier on sent to the Archbishop of Canterbury, signed off by over 50 NGOs last year, calling on the Church of England to pull out its investment in Shell for two big purposes. One, that the activities of Shell has not only brought pain, it has continued to increase environmental injustice in the Niger Delta, and that Shell and the Church of England continuing investment in Shell is sending a wrong signal. In that letter, the Church of England responded and requested for a dialogue. and we're happy we had exchanges on that. And then we also sent to the Archbishop our outcome of our People's AGM. That AGM, we came out with a very strong resolution calling on the investors in Shell and other oil companies in Nigeria to visit the Niger Delta on a fact-finding mission, for them to see from the first on their own what the impact of oil exploration have done to the Niger Delta. First, it has again made the Niger Delta people to lose their livelihood. As we speak, the last year flood, almost the entire communities in the Bayelsa rivers were almost wiped away because of climate change traced to the activities of the oil and gas exploration. And then you talk about the health implications to the people. You will be surprised. The health implication is so huge. The environmental pollution, you go to Port Harcourt, you can't breathe the air freely any longer. So when you put all this together, we call on these investors who are currently investing in Shell and other oil companies in the Niger Delta to have a visit to the Niger Delta to see for themselves and see how the people live in misery and poverty. And also, again, ascertain whether the cleanup going on in Ogoniland is actually going on in a way that they have desired. You will agree with me that since the cleanup was launched in Ogoniland, the expectation from the Ogoni people was that this would have at least addressed the issues, particularly the water pollutions and the environmental pollutions that have happened as a result of the oil exploration in that particular region. But that hasn't happened. So we thought that it was very good for the oil companies to visit. And when the investors, because when you invest in a company, you're not only putting your moral support for that company, you're also showing that you support that company. And we thought that the Church of England, being a church, and as a man of God, I think that the church should stand on the side of the people. If the church continue to invest in a company like Shell, a company that is continuing to, its activity continue to increase environmental pollution, and the company has refused to align with the Paris Agreement, that shows that companies that wants to support the Paris Agreement on climate change, but Shell have refused to align with those agreements after making commitment. So it is wrong for Church of England to lend their moral support to such a company. On the basis of that, we thought that it was nice for Church of England to pull their investment. Otherwise, what the church is doing is endorsing injustice and aligning with injustice. And that is the reason why this whole campaign was launched in Nigeria. And we are happy that today the Church of England have seen reasons with us and they have pulled out.
All right. Mr. Ugolor, so on the other side now, because reports say the church is a small investor in the oil and gas industry, accounting for about less than 1% of its $1 million fund. So my question is, on the other side, while you appreciate the move following your calls on the church, how much of an impact do you think this will have on Shell's operations? Not only Shell, but even the other companies that the church divested its funds from.
We recognize that fact. Thank you very much for these important questions. We recognize that a journey of 1 million miles starts one day. When the first motion was tabled in House of Commons in England to stop slave trade, it started with just a single action. So we are not bothered at all. What is more important, the moral implication of Church of England standing on the side of the people, it is what more important. Just yesterday now, the World Council of Church have also now endorsed the campaign against further oil explorations that will bring injustice to the poor people around the world. So the church decision in the last few days is going to send a signal around the world. It doesn't matter about the percentage of their investment in Shell, but it's the moral implication. And I think that if Shell thinks that because the Church of England investment is less than 1%, they will continue on their business as usual, then they will be making a mistake. That I think that the other investors are also facing risk if they continue to invest in Shell. Definitely, I can assure you that it's a journey we have started and is gathering momentum. And it is also in the interest of countries where shale is invested to begin to think beyond shale and oil companies, because the whole world is moving beyond oil and gas as a source of energy. It is time for government to begin to explore other alternative energy in line with the Paris Agreement on climate change. Because if government, for example, like Nigerian government, do not look beyond oil and gas and they continue to invest, as you know, oil and gas provide huge percentage of the source of income with which we run the budget of Nigeria. Definitely, the Nigerian government is hooked up to the oil business. But the question is that you can see the pain. It is only when you pay a visit to the Niger Delta people that you understand the pain we're going through. Not just that alone, the whole world is moving away from oil and gas. And countries around the world that are very smart are taking decisions to reinvest in energy that is sustainable. So for us in Nigeria, I think the Nigerian government under President Tinubu should begin to explore those alternatives. If we continue to rely on oil and gas, the world is moving away from it. And it's not in our long-term interest. And that is the reason why we're also using both offshore as strategy to raise this awareness. We're also raising this awareness within our country government, particularly this new government, that the idea to concentrate and believe that the only way to grow the economy is to continue to expand investment in oil and gas is not in the interest of the country. And I know, and this is my appeal to the president, as we are also calling on investors to come from around the world to visit the Niger Delta to see for themselves. The president, I also want to use this opportunity to appeal to President Tinubu. I know very well that he just come into the government, and I see how the elite in the Niger Delta are running around him. They will not tell him the truth. And this is what has made President Buhari to fail the people of Niger Delta. I appeal to President Tinubu not to allow this elite who comes from the Niger Delta, who are only coming to Abuja to fend for themselves. President Tinubu should take the decision on his own to visit the people of Niger Delta. He should, as a matter of fact, appoint a special envoy that is dedicated to the issue of the Niger Delta. He should not allow the elite to deceive him in Abuja, because the situation in the Niger Delta is really, really unfortunate. And now the companies are not only pulling out of the onshore, they're moving to offshore. And having destroyed the livelihood of the people in onshore, they are now moving to offshore. And you know the Ogoni people, the Riverine people, the Bayelsa people, they live on fishing. And now they also want to go and destroy the offshore. And they take the asset away to foreign Western Europe to develop Western Europe, but they leave behind the liability for our people. Just recently, Environmental Commission was released. A huge amount of money was assigned that will address the environmental injustice in Bayelsa. So you can see that even Nigerian government do not have the resources to address the current liability of oil and gas in the Niger Delta. And as we speak, the unemployment level in the Niger Delta cannot be explained. The Intervention Development Agency like NDDC, Oil and Gas Commission across the regions, they have failed the people. And so you see the people are losing on both ends. And that's why with the coming of this new government is our hope that President Tinubu will be different and that President Tinubu will not do things the way it has happened. And that Tinubu will not allow himself to be deceived by Niger Delta elite, particularly the politicians who think they are smart. They continue to use the region as a platform to advance their private and family agenda rather than the agenda of the people. I think it is in the interest of the president, why I understand the need for him to continue to rely on oil and gas, but to understand that in the long term, it is not in the interest of the country. The earlier the country begins to look beyond oil and gas as a source of revenue to fund the long-term economic growth of this country, the better for the people of this country. And I also want to assure you that if you look around the whole world landscape, the world is moving away from oil and gas. So Nigeria cannot be an exception. Nigeria is part of those countries that signed on to the Paris Agreement on climate change. And so countries are investing in an alternative source of energy to ensure that there's a long-term benefit. So, but what we have seen in the country today is that we have seen that the oil multinational oil company have taken advantage of the weak regulatory system. Even though we have passed the petroleum industry bill into law, you can still see that the country is still yet to come out with this poor regulatory system that will control the oil company in the country.
All right.
NNPC, yes, thank you very much.
Right. Now, you've been mentioning this matter of Paris Agreement and the fact that it is high time we win ourselves off this matter of oil exploration, because we already see the Dangote Refinery that is being celebrated coming upstream, and I'm wondering what it will take for us to really win ourselves off this matter of fossil fuel that we have gotten so hooked to, and the matter of our commitment to the Paris agreements. How do you see us, really delivering ourselves, if I may use that term, from this matter of fossil fuel and also committing to the Paris agreement that we are signatory to?
Thank you very much. I'm very happy that you asked this question about Dangote Refinery. Again, the whole world is moving towards alternative energy, sustainable energy. I am surprised that Dangote, with his wealth, rather than investing in an alternative energy that will help the country in the future, is still investing in a dirty business, dirty energy source. And you have seen how cloudy the business model of Dangote Refinery. It largely depends on the state to be able to run that refinery. And that, for me, is the usual tradition of Nigerian business. And you will agree with me that the Dangote Refinery business will not fly, because obviously the business model is not healthy. Obviously, foreign investors will not invest in Dangote Refinery. So Dangote Refinery is largely going to be depending on the state. And that, for me, is a bad model, is a unhealthy. And it's my appeal to President Tinubu to be very cautious how they allow the state resources to be used to sustain a private sector. Dangote should learn from his allies. He should learn from his peers from India, from other countries around the world, rich people, how they are moving their resources to something that will better the future of their country. Rather than Dangote investing in alternative energy that will help the country, he has taken advantage of the weak, corrupt national system to put up a refinery that you and I know that Dangote does not have the resources to sustain. And no foreign investors will come and invest in Dangote Refinery. So the model is a failure because it is not in compliance with the Paris Agreement on climate change. And you also know that Dangote is not also a fan of the Paris Agreement on climate change. His businesses are not also aligned to the Paris Agreement on climate change. That's a big issue. It tells you that the business have no long-term analysis. So for me, I feel very strongly that the Nigerian government issue of allocation of crude oil to Dangote Refinery is an issue that we all need to debate. Is that what we want? Why can't we make our refinery work? Why should we allow an individual taking advantage of the weak system to advance his narrow interest? So apart from that, issue of compliance with the future, what will benefit this country in the future? So Dangote Refinery is not in compliance with the Paris Agreement on climate change. And on the basis of that, no foreign investors will put their resources in such a risky, dirty business. I call it dirty business because oil business is dirty. It has no future. The world is moving away from oil and gas. And Dangote, with his wealth and his awareness, I don't see why he shouldn't be aligning himself to the Paris Agreement on climate change. It doesn't make any sense at all. But because he wants to take an advantage of the weak political system, because of the weak regulatory system, and to amass wealth where it is not necessary. So people should be investing in future generation. Dangote business in the oil refinery is not aligning to a justice for future generation. It's just a short-term business idea that will not help this country. And I think that it is in the interest of Nigerian government to begin to look beyond Dangote Refinery as a source of energy sustainability for the country.
The other leg of my colleague's question was the issue of the mandates, and I just wanted to add to that question. I don't think you've addressed it. You know, the mandates that by the year 2030, oil companies should cut down on carbon emissions by then. But Shell, for example, is saying it can only begin to do it as from the year 2050. So I'm wondering if the 2030 is realistic, even though one can argue that the 2050 is so far away, and climate change, everybody is seeing the harsh effects of climate change and all that. And then there's also the concern of, you're talking about oil exploration. Are you so all out against oil exploration, or are you just like, or should we just say you are talking about the cleaner ways now to explore oil in the Niger Delta?
Well, first, let me respond to the first question. And I think this is the major reason why the Church of England pulled out. And I'm sure that in the next few days, when the Church of England, the Synod, will be meeting, one of the discussions that are also going to be focusing on is the activities of the oil companies and as it relates to the issue of climate change, and why suddenly the oil companies are dragging back. Why are they not following the pathway to meet the 1.5 degree centigrade, which we all agreed, and which was the clear target that oil company must first make commitment, and they made the commitment, and suddenly because of the Ukraine war, they are dragging their feet. And I am happy, and I re-emphasize again that the 2030 is realistic, but this company, they are prioritizing profit for their shareholder at the expense of it from government. Is for government to begin to take the responsibility to hold this company accountable. I am very encouraged. We are not discouraged by the activity of some few governments who have continued to give license to oil and gas company. Now, the Secretary General of the United Nations is hosting a conference on climate solution ambition in September. And I'm happy that he's reaching out to foreign governments, reaching out to progressive governments who have also seen the need for us to all work together to see a cleaner means of energy as a means of averting the climate change catastrophe. So in your first question, I think it is possible that this oil company should align themselves to the Paris Agreement on climate change, on which, again, 2030 is possibility. There are some school of thought that say 2050 to give some room for developing countries like Nigeria to have opportunity to design their pathway. All those discussions are on the table. But the most important thing is that the urgency of looking for a climate solution cannot be wiped away from the table.
All right, quickly address the second question, because we've run out of time.
Your last second question, you said you were asking questions about the RAND. Can you just remind me that?
Yes, cleaner ways to explore oil in the Niger Delta.
Yes, I completely agree with you. I am completely against oil exploration that will put the people in a bad situation. I'm sure you are familiar with the story of the Ugolor people, and you saw what oil has done for the community. Your just visit to the Ugolor people will tell you that the time of oil is gone. This is the time now for us to look beyond oil as a source of energy. And that while in the meantime we are talking about looking for other alternative, the way of exploring it has to be clean. And that's why I'm a bit worried when oil was discovered in part of the country, and I see my people being excited. Okay. The only thing that my only message to them is that they should visit the Niger Delta. They will see that there's nothing to celebrate when you discover oil in your back. Now, thank you very much.
The other aspect to this matter of the Church of England that I would like for you to quickly address is that you're urging the church to consider the communities in the Niger Delta who do not have the luxury of moving on from the devastation and environmental degradation left in the wake of the oil exploration. And I'm wondering what you want the Church of England to do more aside divesting from Shell.
There are two things we have asked the Church of England to do to also send this message of the investment to other investors, because the Church of England is very influential in those who are investing in the oil companies around the world. We have also asked the Church of England to also support the loss and damage that came out from the 27 COPs meeting, where the whole world agreed that, yes, there is some liability that is left behind as a result of oil exploration. That loss and damage, you see, make it possible for resources to be allocated to address the impact, the negative impact of oil exploration in the Niger Delta. Just take, for example, the Ogoni land. Now, the UNEP and Shell and others came together to put some resources together for the cleanup. You have seen that Ogoni is less than 2-3% of Niger Delta. They have not been able to address that problem. And the resources is not just enough. And the livelihood of Ogoni people is at stake, completely at stake. And now to address the livelihood of the people of Ogoni as a result of the oil exploration, you require a lot of resources. So we are appealing to the church to join us in appealing to the international community that the livelihood of the Niger Delta people should be addressed.
All right, and that's a fine place to leave the conversation. Thank you so much, Executive Director, Africa Network for Environment and Economic Justice, David Ugolor, for your time on the program.